Don't Feed the Squirrels by Chris Hewitt. Hyde Park had always been Danny's favourite place in the whole wide world. Every other weekend, his father would take him to the popular London tourist spot, and they'd have a fantastic time exploring the many paths that crisscrossed the vast parkland. Come summer, they'd hire a pedalo and pretend to be pirates, the scourge of the Serpentine. For the rest of the year, the park served as the deepest, darkest jungles of Borneo or the high deserts of the Gobi. Any of 1,000 destinations they'd visit just as soon as his father could get the time off work. The best thing about the park, though, the thing Danny most looked forward to, was Stefano's sweet stall. Tucked around the corner from Peter Pan's statue, the old confectioner sold the best sweets in all of London, if not the world. No matter how far their adventures took them, Danny would ensure that Stefano's store was en route, and often the legendary prize of their exploration. One crisp September morning, the intrepid adventurers found themselves at the stall, having spent half the day tracing the source of the mighty Nile back to the long water stretch, the Serpentine. It turned out Livingstone had been a little off the money, 5,000 miles by his father's estimation. They queued at the popular stall, Danny licking his lips in anticipation as they shuffled to the front. Gumballs! No, lemon drops! No, cola bottles, said Danny, his eyes and fingers dancing from one tub to the next. Come on, Danny, don't mess Mr. Scutari around. The old man reached over and ruffled Danny's hair. Come now, it's Stefano, and my favourite adventurer can have anything he wants. Really? Cried Danny. Danny's father shook his head. Thank you, Stefano, but you do spoil him. What did you discover this week, Danny? The lost Spanish gold? No, that was last month. Today we found the source of the Nile. He pointed to the green lake where a solitary frog sat ribbiting on one of the many lily pads, none the wiser for the grand discovery under its webbed feet. I knew it, cried Stefano, taking a paper bag and filling it with a scoop from each of the colourful tubs. I've been saying it for years, but no one listens to an old man. I mean, the clues are all there. Livingstone's statue overlooks the lake. It does? Said Danny. Yes, be sure to tell him you found it on your way out. We will. Promise? Asked Stefano, holding out the biggest bag of sweets Danny had ever seen. He looked to where the old man pointed and back to his nodding father. I'll tell him, cried Danny, grabbing the bag. Thank you, Mr. Scutari. He turned to leave, but the old man held the bag tight, pointing to a sign on the front of his store, the same sign he always pointed to. Danny rolled his eyes. I know. Don't feed the squirrels. Stefano winked and released his grip. That's a good lad. Thank you, Stefano, said Danny's father, paying the old man. We'll be sure to give Dr. Livingstone your regards. They wandered across the park in the direction the old man had pointed, and by the time they reached the park exit, Danny felt quite ill. As instructed, he'd kept his sweets from the squirrel. They always showed an interest in a rustling paper bag, and several clambered down from the trees to follow them. Over here, said Danny, for a mouthful of acid drops. Exiting the park, they crossed the busy Kensington Road. The squirrels hesitated, climbing up and sitting along the iron fence that bordered the park. Danny and his father found Shackleton first, the bronze statue of the great Antarctic explorer, looking down on them as if they were penguins. Danny made a note to come back and ask for some pointers next winter. Ah, Dr. Livingstone, I presume, said Danny's father, finding the statue they saw around the corner, right where Stefano said it would be, overlooking the lake and the recently discovered source of the Nile. True to his word, Danny explained to Dr. Livingstone where he'd gone wrong, and to show there were no hard feelings, lofted on his father's shoulders, he placed the remaining half bag of sweets at the great adventurer's bronze feet. Danny couldn't eat another sweet. He felt ill, his sugar rush fading into a woozy tiredness as sat on his father's shoulders, they made for the underground and home. They'd need to make up a suitable cover story for Danny's lack of appetite and energy. Neither of them saw the small grey squirrel scamper from the park, dodging the traffic before climbing up the red brick wall to reach Livingstone's statue. The squirrel's bushy tail waved back and forth as it delved into the bag of sweets. A moment later, a scurry of hungry grey fiends joined the bold squirrel.
Hi, I'm Rachel L. Tilley, and this is from Playing Tricks. When Freddie first opened his eyes, he thought he was just a bit sleep-dazzled. Rubbing them with the back of his hand, his vision slowly focused, and he realised something was indeed very odd. "Abby," he nudged his wife gently. "Abby, wake up!" She stirred slightly, but not quickly enough to appease him. "Either my eyes are playing tricks on me, or I need help." She finally sat up. Letting out an exasperated sigh, which only seemed to prolong the wait for Freddie, she finally replied, "I don't think it's your eyes that are playing tricks." He waited for her to say more, but instead she got out of bed and started skimming her hand along their bedroom wall. A wall that was no longer painted plaster. Instead, it appeared to be hundreds, if not thousands, of different-sized gobstoppers. Standing up, he found his feet cushioned by white marshmallows. The child in him wanted to lick the wall to be sure they tasted how they looked. Instead, he bounced up and down a few times, his toes enjoying the soft, spongy sensation. Abby looked simultaneously unimpressed and amused. "Okay, so why don't you seem concerned about this?" he asked her. "I mean, I know I'm not concerned, but that's only because you don't seem concerned." "I've seen something similar before," she said. "Not quite as drastic, I must say, but I guess we'll need to see the damage to the rest of the house. You didn't come across any pixies yesterday, did you?" He scratched his brow in thought. Nothing was coming to mind. "I suspect they've decided to play a prank on us." It made a sort of sense, he supposed, but where on earth would he have come across any pixies? Their bedroom door swung open and their 4-year-old came racing in. "Mummy! Daddy! The house is amazing! Thank you! Thank you!" Freddie sat back down on the bed just in time for Max to jump on him for a hug. I guess that answered the question about how widespread the effect was. Moving to the hallway, he glanced out into the street. The other houses in their neighbourhood certainly seemed unchanged from their usual dull selves. "You have to see my bedroom!" Max grabbed his hand and led him through the now gingerbread door. The walls in this room were made of cinder toffee. His stomach rumbled. "I think we should have some breakfast before we figure out what to do next. Max, would you like some cereal?" "No thanks, Dad. I'm already full." Sure enough, Max's room was peppered with bite marks. He'd be surprised if that boy wasn't sick in the very near future. Sliding down the lollipop slide, unsure how they were ever going to get back upstairs again, they seated themselves on the giant gummy bear sofa. "I just can't think how this could have happened."
Hi there, my name is Evan Boffman, and I am an author based in Southern California. I am one of the authors featured in the Raven and Drake anthology Candy Capers, and today I'm going to read to you an excerpt from my story titled Saltwater Sweet. Saltwater Sweet is a story about a mermaid named Serena who finds herself on land and inside a candy shop. Here we go. Here's how the story starts. A mermaid no more, Serena walked out of the ocean to be where the people were. Minutes earlier, a powerful pinch from a magical crab had transformed her tail into legs, her gills into lungs, and nearby kelp into an emerald sundress. Before clamping down on her with his claw, the crustacean had said, "This will hurt. Take it from me, though, it will be far less painful than what you'll find up there beyond the shoreline. May it all be worth the curiosity you have for life on land." Serena was tired of living in the shadows of others' stories. She wanted to feel sunlight on her skin. She wanted earth beneath her feet. She wanted an adventure of her own, no matter the dangers involved. The crab had added, "Remember, you're merely meant to observe, Serena. Be careful what you do above water. For the moment you become truly human, my spell becomes your curse. People will then finally see you for what you really are. Their reactions may disappoint you." Serena, a young woman, stepped free of the waves and approached the person closest to her, a small boy building a castle in the sand. Smiling, she said, "Hello, friend. What does it mean to be truly human? I hope to avoid it." And that is where I'm going to stop this excerpt. It was a really fun time for me writing this story, and I hope that if you do pick up your copy of Candy Capers, that you enjoy my story Saltwater Sweet as well. It can be found on page 249 of the anthology. And again, it was an honor to be a part of this anthology, especially since the proceeds go toward a charity that I find to be very worthwhile, since unfortunately one of my friends passed away years ago from a brain tumor. His name was Cochise, and Cochise, this story, Saltwater Sweet, I dedicate to you and your memory, and I love you, and our friends and our family love and miss you. And again, thank you for listening to me read from Saltwater Sweet, and make sure that you get your copy of Candy Capers as soon as you can. Bye.
Hello, my name's Callum Pierce. I'm going to read a small excerpt from one of my stories, Marvellous. Marvellous takes place in a world that's had all of the magic and creativity and colour sucked out of it, and we'll be joining an imp and a young boy who are trying to bring it all back. Oliver left his grey house to walk down his nondescript street into the drab and dull town centre. He tended to walk with his head down. He was always pretty sure that there would be nothing to see if he bothered to raise it. Everything was dull and dreary, but he'd never really known things to be any different. Oliver expected nothing more from the world. Somewhere, really deep inside him, he had a strange tickling feeling that suggested that things could be different. But he buried that feeling beneath chores and schoolwork as he trudged through life, quite unaware of how miserable his world really was. Arriving in the town centre, a strange noise reached his ears, forcing him to lift his head and gaze across the road. At first, he was certain that he couldn't possibly be seeing what he saw. But then, imagination wasn't something he was ever troubled by. Nobody in this world was bothered by such things. Across the road, two of the dull grey shops had sidled away from each other, making room for another shop to fill the space between them. He watched as a new shop built itself from the ground up. Bricks jumped on top of other bricks, and a door walked into the space that had been left for it. Windows and frames seemed to grow out of the bricks. Through the glass he could see shelves appearing all around the shop. Large glass jars faded into view, filled with strange little blobby things. It didn't look like any of the shops around it. He didn't have a word for what it was that made it stand out. Just not grey or dull and lifeless like everything else. He could feel that buried tickling feeling growing inside him. When faced with such an impossible and alien thing, most people would walk or run in the other direction. They would try their best to forget it had ever happened. Crossing the road to take a closer look, Oliver realised that he wasn't as much like everyone else as he had always assumed himself to be. The knot grey was everywhere inside. Every shelf was filled with different shades of knot grey. It was quite overwhelming. He stood back and watched words painting themselves above the large windows. "Marvellous munchies," it said. A strange-looking man appeared behind the counter inside in a puff of sparkles. He smiled at him through the window and beckoned him inside with a bony finger. Fear was rising inside him, but that tickling feeling was rising too. He found his feet moving towards the door without even deciding to go in there. "Oh, I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to get here." The strange man spoke as though they were old friends. "I had to supercharge my magic in another reality just to be able to exist here." "I just saw this shop build itself," Oliver began. "That can't happen. If you want to know how to get back the colour and the magic in the world, then make sure you get a copy."
Hi, I'm Andrew, Natalie's dad. Natalie wrote the foreword to Candy Capers. Unfortunately, since publication, Natalie has lost her fight with brain cancer, so I'm doing the honours of reading her words. 3 years ago, 2017, and out of the blue, I was diagnosed with a grade 4 brain tumour, something they call a glioblastoma. I was 27, doing the job I loved, in a long-term relationship with a man I adored, and lived a happy and reasonably healthy life. Then, all of a sudden, I had this tumour that I'd never heard of before. It has settled into my brain and taken up residence without a permission form. But that's how these things tend to go. They come out of nowhere, hitting you like a 10-ton truck and embedding themselves in, sticking to you like superglue and making it very hard for you to get rid of them. Brain cancer was something I had heard very little of, or no knowledge of or understanding about. It wasn't something that ever entered my mind. Why would it? No family or friends I knew of had suffered from cancer of this sort, so it was just one of those things that you knew about but you never imagined would happen to you, until it did. Yet from the moment I got my diagnosis, I knew I was going to fight and keep fighting. I was in my late 20s and I wasn't going to let it define who I was or what I would become. Years later, I am still fighting the tumour that is invading my brain and just won't let go. There are things about this condition that are simply brutal to hear. Less than 12% of people diagnosed with a glioblastoma live beyond the 5-year mark. Yet, here I am, 3 years in, still fighting, still determined to not let it beat me. Determined to marry my fiancée in late 2021. Strength has been the key word during this time. The strength to keep fighting. The strength to not give in, even when treatment has me feeling sick to my stomach. The strength to keep living as normal a life as possible. The strength to remain upbeat and positive, if not just for myself and for my own mental health, but also for those around me who need to see that I'm determined to beat this and that I will not give up. The strength to keep living, the living that involves doing those mundane everyday things everyone takes for granted, like taking the dog for a walk, going to work every day, driving, to the bigger things that make life life. Getting married to the man you love, creating a home, going on holiday and sinking your bare feet into the white sands of some tropical country, or even another trip to Disney World to hug Mickey Mouse and watch the fireworks light up the sky over the Princess Castle. Those moments in life that make it all worthwhile. Candy Capers came about as an idea one night by my cousin Gemma, who took up writing and publishing in 2020. She'd heard some of the statistics of brain cancer, the biggest cancer killer of children and under 40s, and of course my current plight, and she wanted to do something to help where she could. What she came up with was an idea for a book, a family-friendly anthology where writers from all over the world contribute by writing short and whimsical stories based around candy. The theme came about due to my passion for food and my experimental nature. I was always trying new flavours and ideas and had been since an early age, which led to me obtaining my degree in food science, where I was able to turn my passion into something I could bring to life. My dream job soon followed, working for a cake company where I got to design new cakes and bakes for some of the more well-known high street coffee shops. Quite ironic really, as now with my current condition I have to steer clear of sugary products. But that won't stop me. Instead, I go back to the kitchen and use my skills and imagination to develop sweet treats using ingredients that do not contain refined sugars. The tumour has a fight on its hands if it thinks it can keep me away from the sweet treats of some kind. Speaking of candy, I think it's about time we dove into the wild imagination of the talented writers who have contributed to this book. Each one took their time to come up with something funny and takes on a whimsical candy-filled adventure in aid of the brain tumour charity. Happy sweet-filled adventures. Natalie Kate Paul. Please support the brain tumour charity by purchasing a copy of Candy Capers. The charity is determined to find a cure for this horrific disease that takes so many lives of people under 40. So please help us fund research to find a cure. Go buy your copy of Candy Capers.